Hello, today I'll be doing my presentation on Martin Luther King Jr. My name is Adriana Cole, and this presentation is for Dr. Butts for the class Educational Leadership. One of the people I think we most think of when we think of educational leadership is Martin Luther King Jr. because he was so influential, and he made a huge change in America that he never necessarily saw its fulfillment, but he started a movement and really made an impact on that movement. So first we're going to start with his early life. I'll talk a little bit about that and his life in general. Then I will move into the theories that I think Martin Luther King Jr. most aligns with, and how he utilizes those theories. And then lastly, I will come to a conclusion and talk about his scriptural analysis. So, early in life, he was born January 15, 1929. He graduated from high school at just the age of 15. He ended up getting his doctorate from Boston University in 1955. He actually finished his degree work in 1953, but he didn't actually get his diploma until 1955. In 1953, after he finished his work, he ended up marrying someone he met in Boston named Coretta Scott. Here's them with two of their kids. They actually ended up having 4 kids. They had 2 sons, 2 daughters. And he, for a while after he got his diploma or finished his diploma work, he worked at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church from 1954 to 1959. He was there until his dad stepped down as the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church. So he became co-pastor in Atlanta, and this was where his grandpa was pastor there, and then his dad, and then he took over. So it was a church that had been passed down through his family, and he was there until from 1960 until he died. So even though he was going around speaking a lot, and he was probably not at the church a lot because he went around to a lot of different places to speak about segregation, he still was the pastor until his death. So one of the first things that Martin Luther King Jr. did was there was a bus boycott in 1955. It lasted 382 days, and during this time, black people said they would not ride the buses until there was change made, and they wanted black and white people to be able to ride the bus together. And so during this time, his house was bombed, he was arrested, he was abused, he was in a lot of ways tortured for his belief, but he did not back down, and after 382 days, black and white people were allowed to be on the bus together. So during his life, he was arrested at least 20 times and assaulted at least 4 times. So as we can see, nothing was really stopping him from what his goal. He had a vision, and he would do anything to get that vision accomplished, even being tortured and arrested and threatened. It didn't bother him, or at least it wasn't going to bother him enough for him to step down. He was elected president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He accepted this position because he was a strong believer that God created all men equal, and that included black and white. And so he wanted to make a difference through the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He was a very strong believer in non-violent protest, and so he led a peaceful protest of 250,000 people in Washington, D.C. This is his most famous speech was given here. I Have a Dream. I'm sure all of us have heard it before. It's a very good, well-written speech. It was very influential, and a lot of people who listened to it, it really impacted. April 4th, 1969, though, in Memphis, Tennessee, he was supposed to be giving another speech, but while he was on his balcony, he was assassinated by James Earl Ray. One of the first leadership theories that I believe apply to Martin Luther King Jr. is this idea of transformational leadership. It is an exceptional form of influence that moves followers to do more than what they are expected to do. And we see this in the life of Martin Luther King Jr. He was not expected to go through all that he went through and do all that he did, but he felt that he needed to. He wanted to move followers to do the same, to do something that was different than what was normal. He was very inspirational, and he inspired many people to change. I would consider him a charismatic leader, so he was dominant. He was hard to ignore. He had the desired influence. He really wanted to change the next generation, to make them more accepting of everyone and to have everyone be able to be friends. And he had strong moral values. He was a pastor. A lot of what he did because of things he found in the Bible, such as the idea that we're all one in Christ, we're all equal. He was a very big proponent of nonviolent protests because of the idea that we should love our enemies, even those who hate us, we should love. And so he never really went to violence because he really wanted to make a change in a peaceful way. He was a strong role model. He modeled his life after what he said. You never really hear about him doing anything violent or speaking negative. He only talked about positive and what image he had. He had ideological goals with moral overtones, so his goals were based, again, on the Bible, and he had goals that he wanted to accomplish that might have seemed unrealistic at the time, but as we see today, they weren't unrealistic, and he got his goals accomplished. And he aroused motives, so when people listened to him, they were drawn to action. So because of all that he had done, some believed in his goal, and others wanted this change as well and felt connected to his mission and felt like they had a voice and they were being heard. Another form of leadership I think we see in Martin Luther King Jr. is inclusive leadership. And this is the need to feel included, and that is a basic human need. Most black people at the time did not feel like they fit in. They did not feel included. They felt excluded and different. They felt as though they were outsiders. And there's just that. And Martin Luther King Jr. believed in the value of diversity. The fact that God made us all different, and that's a good thing, that we're all different. He ensured justice and equity. He wanted justice for everyone. If you listen to the I Have a Dream speech in its entirety, he speaks about justice a lot, and just this vision that he has about justice. And he believed in fair treatment for all. He wanted everyone to be treated equally. This is a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. He said, "I have the audacity to believe that people everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits." So he just believed everyone should not need for anything. They should have education, they should have culture, dignity, they should have equal rights, and this you see in inclusive leadership. Another form of leadership is servant leadership. So in this form of leadership, it's ethical, and I believe that Martin Luther King Jr. had strong ethics that he implemented. And then we see he served others first. He had characteristics of servant leadership. He believed in healing. He wanted to heal others, make them whole. He was persuasive. If you listen to his speech, it's a very persuasive speech, and he does a really good job at saying the ideas of what he wanted. He had foresight. He had this vision that maybe did not seem realistic at the time, but we see now that it is possible and that his vision did come to fruition. And he wanted to build a community. He believed that black and white could live hand in hand and all be friends, and he wanted to build that community. So his context and culture obviously played a big part in it, with him being black and having lived in segregation. He lived in a time before, at this time I believe people could vote, but he lived in a time where black people couldn't even vote. He was beaten, he was treated differently, and so he understood that, and then he had a sense of a higher calling. He believed that God wanted him to do this, and he believed that he was sent to a higher calling. And then the outcome is he made a huge societal impact, and we see that today. Another form of leadership is authentic leadership. This is leading from conviction. So I believe he did really lead from conviction. And his life experiences played a role in the impact that they had on him. He, as I said before, he grew up in a time where things were a lot different, and he just knew he had this vision of what he wanted, and he wanted to see it come to fruition. He was passionate about this mission, willing to give everything he had to this mission. He had strong values. He was self-disciplined. He went to many, many places speaking. He carried himself in a way where people wanted to listen, and he had compassionate heart. He really believed in this goal, and you can see that if you listen to any of his speeches, that this wasn't just something he did just to do. He really believed in this mission. He had internalized moral perspective. So again, he believed this was something God wanted him to do, and he was willing to do what he needed to do. Components: he was confident. He used moral reasoning. His critical life events played a huge role in what he did. He was optimistic. He believed that this goal could be accomplished, and he never gave up hope that one day he would have his vision come to light. And another one is trait approach. Martin Luther King Jr. had many traits that made him a great leader. So he was intelligent, he had his doctorate, he had insight, he had a vision for what he wanted, initiative, he was willing to do what it took. He was persistent, he never gave up, he was self-confident, he believed in himself and in his mission, and he was determined. He was willing to go thousands of miles all over the country to explain this goal that he had in mind. So my scriptural comparison is he believed that everyone had a God-given right to be free. He was committed to nonviolent protest on the premise we should love our enemies. And here's a quote by him. It says, "I'm going on believing and knowing that God is alive. You see, as long as love is around, God is alive. As long as justice is around, God is alive. There are certain conceptions of God that needed to die, but not God. You see, God is the supreme noun of life. He's not an adjective. He is the supreme subject of life. He's not a verb. He's the supreme independent clause. He's not a dependent clause. Everyone else is dependent on him, but he is dependent on nothing." So as we see, he really believed that this was a mission from God, and this is what God wanted, and he was willing to do what it took. So I'm going to finish with part of his I Have a Dream speech, because I feel like that is his most influential work that we see. This is only part of it. It's a lot longer, so if you want to read all of it, you'll have to read all of it, but this is part of it. It says, "I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right down in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with the little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, and rough places will be made plain. And the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and the flesh shall see it together. We will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last." And today we see that his goal was accomplished and now all men are free, and this was partly due to Martin Luther King Jr. and his leadership qualities. Thank you for listening.